Thanks for coming in today.
Thanks for seeing me. I was really looking forward to session all week.
Good. I'm glad you're here.
Me too. So, I know I talk about my relationship with Alex a lot, but I think I'm going to spend a lot of the session today talking about it, if that's okay.
Yeah, that's perfectly fine.
Okay. So, I don't know what to do. I'm feeling really anxious all the time. My palms are really sweaty right now. Basically, Alex asked me to move in with him. And I know that this is supposed to make me feel really excited and happy and the next big step, and he definitely sees it as the next big step. But I just don't know if I can do that. I can't really conceptualize what's holding me back from moving forward with my life with him. And I'm also really scared because this past week before he brought up moving in, he sort of sat down with me, expressed how he felt about our relationship and where he sees it going. And then he told me he's having a really difficult time going anywhere with it because he feels like I'm holding back and not letting anything become more serious. After telling me all this, he said in his personal life and in our relationship, he feels like he's at this turning point. You know, his career's established. He's, defining himself professionally. He sees me as the person he wants to be with. And at the same time, from a rational perspective, like my career is established to a certain degree, and he really just wants to take that next step, which is why he asked me to move in with him.
And I understand moving in with your partner is a huge deal for a lot of couples. But why do you think you have so much anxiety with it, moving forward with him?
I really don't know. If I sit in session and I'm completely honest with you, I love him. I really do. He's a great guy. And I think that's part of why I feel scared, because I feel like things are really great right now. Like, why mess that up? Why make that huge commitment and risk sort of this nice dynamic that we already have by moving in and messing it all up?
I'm just curious, what do you define as commitment? Do you not see your relationship right now as one? Because I hear you saying, moving forward with him, making that big commitment. I'm just curious, what does that mean to you?
Yeah, that's a good point. We're in a monogamous relationship. Neither of us are seeing anyone else. I guess when I'm saying commitment to you here, I mean that commitment of like forever. Sort of, why would I plan to move in with someone if I wasn't saying to myself, this is the one, I'm going to do this forever? And I don't know. It kind of freaks me out.
Understandable. I know you've been with Alex for quite a while, so there must be some great things about your relationship with him, assuming so. I'd be curious to hear kind of more about your relationship with him and what that looks like.
Yeah. Well, I've told you a little bit about it in the past, but I've kind of avoided certain details because I like to focus on the present. But I think it might be helpful for me to talk a little bit about sort of how we started. So in undergrad, we took an intro to psych class together freshman year, and we met in there, and we became friends pretty quickly, and we remained friends throughout the rest of undergrad. And he was always just like that stable friend to me, He was someone I would go to and I could talk to about anything. I could talk to him about other guys I was dating or other guys I had crushes on or things from my past or current stressors. And he was just really easy to communicate with from the get-go. It was clear that he was just a great person overall. He never judged me about my past. I felt like from the beginning he really saw me for me, which was rare. And then senior year came around, and there's a lot of changes going on senior year, and I get really anxious with transitions. And he was the one guy I always found myself, turning back to and being able to open up to without any hesitation. So he knew everything. I couldn't tell anyone else, but he knew everything. And as time reached closer to graduation and my anxieties were peaking, my relationship with him was growing closer and closer. And it was about that time that he sort of came to me and explained to me that he thought he had feelings for me, and he kind of wanted to take it a step further than the friendship we had. But he sort of left the ball in my court, and he left it up to me, which is just another example of how great he is. I mean, even when he's expressing all these really intense emotions for me, he was saying, how do you feel about this? You know, sort of everything you'd ever want in a partner and a friend. And he just always took my emotions into consideration before his own. And he never wanted me to feel uncomfortable. So again, I was anxious, worried I was going to ruin the relationship. So I was hesitant, but I really did want to give it a try. I loved that he loved and embraced me for everything that I was, and vice versa. I felt like I loved and embraced him. And we've been together sort of ever since then.
Wow. That sounds like a very intense and very great and positive relationship. It seems like Alex is very supportive, very loving, caring, great communicator with you, which are all great qualities to have in a relationship. So why do you think there's fear of becoming more serious with him then, if he possesses like all these great qualities that you really can see having a future with someone who possesses these characteristics that are, you know, pretty important to have in a relationship?
Yeah, I don't know. That's sort of what I struggle with, and that's why I think it's helpful for me to talk about, because the rational side of me knows he's such a great guy. You know, I love him so much. What more could I want? But when I think back and I try to understand, you know, despite loving him and wanting to be with him, why I have this fear, the only thing I can sort of think through is, you know, what I witnessed with my own parents and my own family dynamic and how that affects me.
Mm-hmm. And definitely family can have an impact on the person you become, because it is like the primary caregivers and those individuals that you're constantly around growing up throughout your time as a child and a young adult. Would you be okay with telling me kind of more about your family dynamics and what it looked like exactly?
Yeah, sure. So I guess I'll start from the biggest major event I can think of in childhood, which was when my mom died when I was little. And I just, like, before that happened, I remember she was so full of life, and she would tell me all these funny stories about my dad and her spending time together, and her face would just sort of light up when she would tell these stories. And I don't know if my memory has sort of colored it and she really lights up more because of my memory, or in my mind that's really what was happening. And you know, she was just so happy reminiscing about these things. And so that's sort of how I imagined it. And then in the last few years I've started to sort of think through more of those memories and realize that there seemed to be like sort of a sadness there. So even though her face was lighting up, the room and the energy around it, it felt dark and sad. And when I was little, I couldn't really understand what this meant. So when I was like 10 or so, my dad became abusive. And it all started when he got fired from his job, and he had a really difficult time sustaining the income of our house. And he's an old-fashioned kind of guy, so that really affected his self-esteem. And he would just get so upset with my mom. She started working at this time to sort of help out, and this like crushed his ego. It was, you know, a pride thing. He wasn't the breadwinner any longer. He felt like a failure because he couldn't provide for us, and the fact that my mom was working, I think he felt like was a direct attack on him, like he wasn't manly enough or something. So it was at that time that he started drinking, and he just sort of spiraled down. His drinking got out of control, and a lot of times he would act out emotionally with a lot of anger, sort of at anyone who would get in his way, and we would suffer the consequences of that.
That sounds like a really intense and terrifying experience. I'm really sorry that you went through that. It's just so terrible to hear.
It really was. It was one of the hardest things, you know, I've ever had to come to terms with, especially as an adult, trying to reflect on it. You know, and I remember seeing how my mom was trying to help our family, And instead of sort of thanking her and seeing her as an equal, he just took out all of his anger and insecurities on her. When she became able to sort of tell these stories to me, she would fill with tears, and she would start to be able to explain just these horrible, traumatic things. And my dad, he would push, he would shove, he would hit whoever disagreed with him. And it was sort of like a switch in his personality, and it was just so scary to see.
That sounds like such a terrifying experience, and to see that fear and upset in your mother must have been very difficult for you, especially as a young child.
It was.
How were you able to cope with everything that was going on? Were you able to cope?
I mean, I guess I got through it. I think I tried my best to just avoid him, especially at times when it was clear he was drunk. I think my way of dealing with everything was just avoiding it and ignoring the situation as much as possible.
As I hear you telling me about this relationship your dad had with your mom, as well as his impact on your family, it makes me think, I'm curious if you feel comfortable enough, would you kind of tell me more about the relationship you had with your dad and what that looked like? As I hear you telling me about your mom and him, I'm curious to see what your relationship kind of was like with him.
Yeah, I don't mind talking about it. I'm just sort of wondering what this has to do with my relationship with Alex.
Mm-hmm. I'm wondering if the relationship you had with your dad throughout your childhood and what you witnessed of your parents' relationship is affecting maybe you moving forward with your relationship with Alex. And we don't have to get into this right now. We can talk about something else. I know when I first started talking to you, you explained that your mother talked about your dad in a very loving way. And later you stated how terrible he was. And I wonder if that's what you're scared might happen with you and Alex.
I've never really thought of it like that. I mean, after all of this transpired with the abuse and then my mom dying, I sort of counted down the last 3 years until I was 18 and I could become independent and move out of the house and get away from my dad. And around that time, I really promised myself that I would never, ever be in a toxic relationship like the one my parents had. And I became super independent, took on the responsible role of taking care of, protecting my sister and I. And when it came to forming new friendships and trusting other people in college and in a setting that was different from the one I had grown up in, it was so difficult for me to even consider making that a priority. I guess you can say I have few good friends from childhood that I've stayed in touch with who know bits and pieces of my past. But really, when it comes to forming new relationships, that's always been something that's so difficult for me.
And I can definitely understand where you're coming from and how your experiences throughout your time growing up would affect the development of, issuing new relationships with and creating new relationships with different types of people that you meet throughout your life.
Yeah. And I think also I was so scared because what I saw when my parents made a commitment to each other, and again, that word commitment, just everything changed. And the last thing I would ever want for myself is what my mom had and what my mom was stuck with. And I know rationally that Alex isn't like everyone else. But at the same time, I just had this huge fear of involving myself with men in a major aspect of my life and getting stuck.
Mm-hmm. Well, you've been through a lot, and understandably so why you would feel that way. How have you and Alex managed to be together for 4 years at this point? I would say that's quite a serious commitment in itself, even if it's not about a proposal or moving in with each other or marriage. Especially since you state that it's so difficult for you to get close to any guys. How was that different when it came to interacting and developing a relationship with Alex?
I honestly think that a lot of our relationship, since it was built on that friendship in undergrad, I got to know him in a variety of contexts, and I saw how he interacted, and treated girls he dated that weren't me. I saw how he treated his peers in class. I saw how he treated his guy friends, and and seeing sort of all of those aspects and seeing that he was this good person in each of these aspects of his life sort of gave me trust in him. And then when we would interact alone on an intimate level, whether it was friendship or when we were dating, he would always ask my opinions on things. And he would choose to respond to a different situation, but you know, it always reaffirmed sort of that good-natured person that I've always seen him as. And I really started to feel and see him, you know, that there are differences in men and that not all men are going to be like my father. However, I still have this uneasy feeling that keeps me from taking these next steps.
Mm-hmm. If I'm hearing you correctly, it kind of seems like you're struggling with part of you wanting to tell him about how you're feeling and part of you that's scared to tell Alex about how you're feeling.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, the bigger part of me wants to tell him. You know, I want to be honest with him and share with him what I'm feeling, but I'm scared. You know, I don't want to hurt him. When I step back, though, and sitting in session with you and talking it out, it's forcing me to think about sort of how he's reacted to things in the past. And I do realize no matter what I've told him, mm-hmm. he's always accepted me and loved me for who I was, regardless of my emotional baggage.
Mm-hmm. So to reiterate kind of what you're saying, you're telling me he's very accepting of you. And it seems that everything that he's seen with you, he's just embraced.
Yeah.
And I understand why you may think and feel the way you do, but from what you've told me previously, it really seems like Alex is quite understanding about your past and very accepting of you and who you are and everything that shaped you into the person you are today, and obviously loves you greatly. That I think maybe opening up to him about how you're feeling may make him feel better too as well, in order for him to better understand kind of what the holdup is in moving forward in your relationship and what's delaying your process of moving in with him to a better degree.
Yeah, I mean, sitting in session and talking with you is making me feel like communicating with him is probably the right choice, because he does know my past, and it's not like some hidden secret that he won't understand. I'm sure, you know, in our day-to-day life, he forgets or doesn't really see how the past sort of impacts my current situation, but I think having a conversation with him and sort of exploring what we're exploring in here and my own insecurities and baggage he'll be understanding.
I believe there's a strong possibility that he'll be greatly understanding and wanting to take the appropriate steps that's going to make you feel comfortable and make you feel reassured in what you need in order to get to where, you know, you both want to be.
You know, it may be worth a shot. I hope you don't mind asking, and if it's not okay, you can definitely tell me, but I'm wondering if maybe next session or the next couple of sessions, I could see what Alex's schedule is like, and maybe he could join in on a session. And
I think that would be a great idea. That way we can explore and express what needs to be said in a safe and open environment together, and maybe brainstorm how we can work through this.
I think that'd be really good.